today my guest is Karin Velez. Karin, I've been following for a year or so. I've been following for a long time, and I've been very, I don't know, patiently waiting for for the chance for us to do this. But Karin has this super cool podcast called Just Grow Something, and we're going to talk about that and more because I am learning so much about her every time. So, Karin, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to finally find the time in our crazy schedules for me to be able to be here and talk to you. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. And so Karin has, we were just talking about the fact that Karin was doing two podcasts a week, which is crazy pants. And now she's doing one unless she has something else to say, and then she'll just send it out. But tell us, if you don't mind telling us about Just Grow Something. Where did that come from?
Yeah. My husband and I own a 40-acre market farm in West Central Missouri. It started as a 5-acre homestead, and I was running my own business out of the home and found myself staring out the window at my garden when I was supposed to be working, going, "Oh, I'd really rather be out there." And tried to figure out a way to, maybe I could make a little side money from the garden. It's doing really well, and came across this idea of doing a community supported agriculture program and started that up. And one thing led to another. And basically, it became my full time job. And I closed my business. And then my husband came off of active duty, and he also joined the farm business, and we expanded from the 5 acres to the 40 acres. And it was all, it's all produce raised without any sort of artificial chemical inputs of any kind. We've raised livestock also. And somewhere along the way, I decided that I needed to go back to school, and I wanted to get my degree in horticulture. So I went online to Oregon State University and got my degree. And then when I graduated, it was like, okay, that's great. I got more knowledge. I can do these things to help our farm business, but what else can I do with it? And along the way, I had sort of discovered the power in food. That's, how empowering it is to know how to grow your own stuff, how everybody should know how to grow something of their own. And so the idea for starting a podcast, and like just that plea of, just grow something of your own, please, and turn that also into a second business of, doing garden consulting and education and teaching classes. And the podcast is just kind of goes along with it. So now I also go out to people's homes and sort of help them test their soil, figure out their garden space, figure out where to position their beds, whether they should do in ground or, in raised containers, help them develop a garden plan, or develop one for them to get them through, the next few years, and just kind of teach people like, hey, it doesn't matter how much space you have or don't have. You absolutely can grow something. I don't care if you have a windowless room in a downtown apartment. We can get you to be able to grow something in a container with a little light. Like I swear to you. And the sense of empowerment that comes from that, looking at just one thing that's on your plate and saying, I grew that, is sort of visceral. There is this sort of innate feeling in all of us to be able to provide for ourselves and provide for other people. And food is one of those three main things that we need as humans. And so if you can say, yes, I did that, it really is just an empowering feeling. So it's just more about kind of spreading that feeling to other people and helping them figure out how to do it, whether it's a hobby or if it's a way to help provide, for their families.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's so, I can't even put into words how great that is, because it really it's there's so much to it, and it doesn't have to be so like scientific. Like, put something in a pot, you're going to see the sprouts start to come up, and you're going to keep watching that. Like, they're like babies, serious. You know how that is. I don't have to tell you, but like, if as you see them come up, you're like, oh, is it a little bit taller today? Does it need a little bit of water? Should I be feeding that? And then when you eat it, it's like there's not many feelings quite like that. Like, And I had a Joy Kelly, I think is her last name, was on the podcast a year or so ago, and she was telling me that at least lettuce, but most produce loses so much of the nutritional content as soon as it's picked. Like, so the closer it is to you, the more nutrition you're actually getting from that food. And so how
Yeah, that's one of the things that we tell people all the time. The closer your food is to your plate, the more nutritious it is for you. If you use broccoli as an example, the vitamin C content in broccoli is degraded by 50% within 24 hours. It has a half-life of 24 hours for most of the nutrients that are in it. And if you think about the broccoli that is like in the produce section in the grocery store, okay, it was picked and it was, granted, they're hydrocooled right there in the field and they are kept as close to 32 degrees as possible to help maintain, that those nutrients during the sort of chain. But get it from the field into the truck, get it from the truck into, the packing house or whatever, get it onto a different truck, get it to the next warehouse where it gets staged for the other trucks to come and pick it up, and then take it to the grocery store. And then, okay, is it sitting in the back for 3 days before it gets put out on the shelf, or does it come out in 24 hours? And how long has it been on the shelf?
right,
You have zero way of knowing how long that's been sitting there. So honestly, if you are trying to get the most nutrition out of fresh fruits and vegetables that you possibly can, you either grow it yourself or you buy it frozen, because unfortunately we constantly have pushed this use fresh, but the reality is that the fresh just isn't as nutrient dense as it used to be. And there's a lot more that goes to it. I mean, it's not just how long it has taken for it to get from field to fork, but it's also the chemical inputs that are used in conventional growing now. The soil is not as complete as it was. And so one of the things that I have looked very closely at has been, and that I continue to try to study, is the correlation between the soil nutrients and the plant nutrients, and then the plant nutrients in terms of what we harvest from the plant and how that translates into our own nutrition. So if you've got something that is being grown with simply chemical inputs of your main nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and it's just feeding the plant to get the plant to be big enough to be able to harvest,
right,
is that nutritionally or as nutritionally dense as us feeding the soil and allowing the soil to feed the plant, with not just those three main macronutrients, but all the micronutrients and trace minerals and elements that are in that soil. Is that the better way? And what we're starting to see is, yeah, that, I mean, it logically you would think, oh, well, that makes sense. But, for all these years, been like, oh no, just give it the nutrients that it needs, in order to be able to get big and bold, and then we can cut it off, and then
your
that
leaves are
just
getting yellow, it's missing, so such and such. So we'll just add a little bit more of that.
Right, exactly. Instead of focusing on what the, what should truly be feeding that plant, which is the soil. So you have to start with the soil health. So,
Ah, that's
yep,
so good. And then also when you grow something and then you eat it, it tastes a million times better than anything that you would buy in a store.
absolutely. And that has a lot to do with the soil composition too. You can grow the exact same thing as your neighbor. You can grow carrots in your garden and they can grow carrots in theirs. And if your soil is more acidic than theirs, then yours is going to have a different flavor profile. Or if you have a higher level of potassium in your soil, it's going to taste different than what your neighbor's soil does. So, and either way, it's still going to have more flavor than what you could get at the grocery store. So, so if you can't
Right?
grow it yourself and you can't go to the farmer's market,
Oh my,
those are your two best ways to get your food, really. And looking at it from a price standpoint, it's hard to get people sometimes to think about, okay, the effort that it takes to be able to grow something yourself, but think of it as you're paying yourself. You are paying yourself back in terms of the level of nutrients that you are putting into your body and the whole health that you are getting from that. But then if you're having to go and supplement what you're growing from the farmer's market, and you might be paying a higher price for that because most of those small growers aren't using chemical inputs and they're harvesting by hand, and they're not these huge farms that are using, ultra cheap farm labor.
right.
Well, just think of it as you are investing in your health versus, paying the doctor the next time you have to go to the doctor because
Right.
were malnourished or whatever that is. It's
Right.
it's a very different way to think of things in terms of our food. And unfortunately, we have been ingrained to think that food is that stuff that's in the boxes on the shelves with the laundry list of ingredients. And that's not food. That's the furthest thing possible from food, and that's what we have to get away from.
Oh my gosh. I um I saw a meme recently on Instagram, and I don't know if you saw this or if you've seen it before, but it was oh no, it wasn't even a meme. It was Port Newmarket Gardener, the Irish guy. I shared it because it just like it blew my mind. It was so simple, but it just blew my mind. So he was saying basically uh around the edges of the grocery store, or there's like a health food section of the grocery store. He's like, what's the rest of the store?
Right.
Mm.
Exactly. If that's the health food section, what is the rest of the stuff that we're eating? Uh-oh. Yeah,
Right.
that's a big question mark. Yeah.
Ooh, that was harsh, but so true. um
Hmm.
but so tell can you tell us about more about your podcast? So because your podcast is like, your episodes are like teaching in a very real way, and easy to use.
Oh,
Use.
well, I'm glad that it's easy to consume. That's good because I feel like I get a little sciencey sometimes. And there's a reason for that. I mean, the tagline of the podcast is the why behind the how of gardening. And that's because I feel like we get better at something if we understand why we're doing it. So rather than just saying, okay, go out and do this thing and just expect these results, if you understand why you're doing the thing and why it works in the manner that you're being told to do it in, then if something goes wrong or it's doing something differently than what you expect, you can actually troubleshoot that yourself. And you don't have to go and rely on some chemical inputs or whatever in order to be able to fix that. Understanding the reasons behind why plants grow the way they do and why insects act the way that they do, and the difference between a monoculture and planting things in groups, and why that would work. That's the whole premise behind the podcast. So yes, basics of how to grow things, because I want people, like I said, to grow their own food regardless of where they are gardening. It can be pots on your back porch. It can be one single raised bed. It can be an arrow garden on your countertop, or some, version thereof. But understanding what the plant needs in terms of, for its growth, and understanding, how insects are attracted and why we want to mulch and all those different things, I think makes it easier for us as we go forward to go, oh yeah, that's why that's working, or that's why that's not working, or that's why I'm having this problem, so basics, but then also a little bit deeper dive into the science behind things too.
Yeah.
Probably mostly because that's how my brain works. So
Yeah,
that's how I
well,
share it.
totally. I mean, if we've been gardening all along, or whatever, like I've been gardening for a long time, but when I've listened to your episodes where you're like, so this is super helpful, or this might be why your plants are not doing a great thing. This is really good for your plants. This is the best way to plant them, and blah blah blah. I'm just like, oh, that's why it didn't work. That's why it
Right.
didn't work. And that's super helpful. Like, maybe this year's garden is not going to be awesome for everything, but next year we know better. Or,
Right.
our fall crops, like you just had on your episode last week. We can learn about our fall crops and get ready for the next season, and just get better at growing more, and just get better at growing. And
Yeah. Well, I mean, it comes from experience. This is our 17th season growing on our farm. So growing for the public, and then I gardened for several years, just for us, for our own sake prior to that. So it's all of that knowledge, understanding that I started in a small corner of my suburban backyard and had zero clue what I was doing, literally grabbed some seeds, threw them in the ground and said, "Okay, grow." I mean, there was no soil preparation. I had no idea. I knew nothing. Some of it grew miraculously. Some of it did not. I had cucumbers that completely took over and were coming out of the garden area, and, carrots that didn't do anything because I was trying to garden in clay. But it wasn't a complete failure, number one, which was kind of cool. And then it allowed me to say, okay, well, what do I do different? What do I do next? How do I learn how to do this better? And then sort of just trial and error, number one, but then also getting myself the education, going and reading every resource I could possibly find in order to be able to become better at it and figuring out why things were happening the way that they were. So if I can help somebody sort of skip 5 steps, not go through the same mistakes and stuff that I did and have the same crop failures that I did and still do. There is, everything that I talk about is like perfect world scenario, right? Like it's like this is how things should be working, this is how we should be doing. But the reality is, yeah, I put 3 layers of mulch down and I still have weeds coming up, or it hasn't stopped raining, so I can't do anything in the garden. Like that's always going to be the situation. But as long as you have the information at hand and you have the knowledge to be able to move forward with it, then you can do the best you can with what you're handed. At least you have the knowledge part. The Mother Nature part is completely out of your hands, but at least you have the knowledge to be able to kind of go forward and do the best that you can and just constantly, learn.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that's part of why I like your podcast so much, other than the fact that you have this beautiful voice that is just so like not put me to sleep, but I get
Thank
to
you.
learn from you. But like all of the studying and stuff that you've done, I get, like you were saying, I'm skipping that stuff. And I can listen while I'm working, or I can listen while I'm walking or making jam or whatever. And I'm absorbing your knowledge so that I can be better. So, what a gift you are. What a gift your podcast is. What a gift you are. I'm just going to go with that. You're a gift. Um, and I know that um like starting out gardening is like it's like a gateway drug, right? Like you start
Oh
small
yeah.
and then you're like, but what if I can do this? And
Oh
then
yeah. Yeah. It was
it's
that little tiny corner
yep.
behind a shed. It was maybe, I don't know, 4x4, 6x6 at the most, with some stuff just thrown into it. And then we moved to our 5 acre homestead. And I literally planted like a half an acre of that garden. And then the next year it was, I guess it was a quarter acre and then it was a half acre. It was like, okay, what did I just do? But look at all
And
the room I
house,
have.
honey.
Look what I could do. Yeah, exactly. Here, I told my husband, go plant this corn and wasn't super specific about don't plant the entire bag of corn. And we had sweet corn coming out our ears. And the boys were out there, picking it off the plant and eating it out there and tossing it in the ground. I mean, if we had so much corn, but that was what prompted me to go, well, we could do something with this because look at this abundance.
Right.
We had people coming over every weekend. I'm like, take this home with you. Let me feed you while you're here. Now take this home with you. I learned to can, I learned to freeze, and, was still giving stuff away. And it was like, okay, cool. If we've got this abundance, then what can I do with it? So, and then of course, the following year when we finally decided, or I decided to do something like a business for it, all of a sudden, then I started having problems in the garden. Then there was weeds, then there was insects, then there was fertility issues. It was like, a minute, what happened? I'm so good
Oh,
at this.
well, but if you're gardening larger scale, like you don't have a staff, right? I assume.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, the kids, that was it.
Right. I mean, there's more to manage. And then there's also the
Well,
pressure.
well, yes, it was also the fact that, when you're kind of breaking virgin ground and that virgin ground used to be cattle pasture, it was really fertile, and I didn't know anything about fertility. I knew nothing about the soil nutrients or any of that stuff. I just planted my stuff. And so the first 2 years it did really, really well. And the plants were really strong and it wasn't an issue. And then by year 3, well, I didn't know about adding something back into the soil. It didn't dawn on me, okay, well, those plants are taking those nutrients out of the soil, and then I'm pulling the plants at the end of the year. I need to do something to put those nutrients back in, or those plants are going to start starving, which is exactly what happened. By the third season, we were pulling all the nutrients out of the soil. Now the plants weren't doing nearly as well. And all that is, it's like a homing beacon for the insects to come in and start predating because they see these weak plants. So now we had, and then we had the weeds popping up because we had turned over that cattle pasture, which was all grass seed, you know. So then that started popping up. So all of a sudden it was like year 3, I'm supposed to be, doing this as part of my job, and all of a sudden it's a disaster. So that was when the education of Farmer Karen began, and I started like just reading everything I could get my hands on and figuring out the whole soil component of things. So
Yeah. And so I just to go back to your podcast, of course, but
yeah.
uh, you focus on one thing each week. Like like I remember, recently you did like the insects, and you've
Mhm.
got one on like green peppers and stuff like that. Like, so focusing on one thing. So it's not like, you have to take a million notes and like, oh my gosh, for corn you do this and for peppers you do this. It's like on a week, just like focus on one thing, and then, we'll put that into practice, or just, put that in your cap, right? Um, but I love that it's just like it's bite size. It's bite size, but you also say, you tell us why and how, like, and which of course your tagline, but um it helps me. Like I have a hard time with just like book reading, and like you just do it this way. You just do it,
Right. Right.
understanding why. I used to work at a hotel as a night auditor, and they're like, no, you just add this up and do this. I'm like, I don't understand what that means. I'm just putting numbers on paper, and if it doesn't work, I have no idea why.
Right. Yeah. I try to keep it digestible, keep it in small chunks focused on one particular topic. But then also, if people are on the email list, then they'll get an email the day that the podcast comes out. And I try to include references and resources within that email, in addition to like some of the highlights of these are the things that you might want to take note of, or these are the important points from this. And then oftentimes you can also find an article on my website that also corresponds to that, like a blog post about that particular, topic or whatever. And then I'll try to follow up with some Instagram, like a reel or a TikTok or something that talks a little bit about it, so that you get it in just these tiny little chunks, but it reinforces the idea of whatever it was we were talking about. Sometimes it doesn't work. I mean, it's the middle of the summer. It's our busy season on the farm. Like there's not a whole lot of time for content creation, as much as it's constantly going in my brain like, oh, I could do this, or I could talk about this. I'm trying to get better about being less of a perfectionist when it comes to doing a video and throwing it out there. It used to be like, okay, I need to record it. Now I'm going to have to edit it. I have to make sure that I said just the right thing. Oh, let me record that again because I don't like that. And now I'm just like, just say it. Just spout what it is that you have to say and throw it out there. If people are going to grasp the information, they can't grasp it if you don't put it out there. So put it out there. So I'm trying to get better, but during the summertime, things start to take a little bit of a nosedive in terms of, what I'm putting out there. But I still try to catch up with that later on and put some information out, just because I think it, like, digestible chunks is the easier way for people to kind of grasp a concept, especially if they see it or hear it more than once. It's like I constantly talk about mulch. I'm sure people like ad nauseum, I talk about mulch. And I'm sure people are tired of hearing me say mulch, mulch, mulch in almost every episode but it is one of those things that is so important. And so if I constantly repeat it, maybe people are going to catch on like, you need to mulch in your garden. And here's why. So,
And why do
so many reasons why we mulch. So many reasons. I mean, if you look in natural systems, in any vibrant area where things are growing lushly, you are not going to find a bunch of bare ground. Some plant is going to be taking up that space unless it is near an allelopathic type of a plant that's giving off toxins to keep anything from growing near it. Or if there has been some sort of a natural disaster like a fire or something, in which case that bare ground is very quickly going to be taken up by those advantageous plants that come in to repopulate that ground. So, why on earth would we think it was a good idea to plant in our garden all of our plants in a nice, neat little row and then just leave all that soil open to the atmosphere? So, if you're not going to use plants as sort of that, way to fill in those gaps and to cover that soil, then you need to be using mulch, whether it's wood mulch or straw or whatever your preferred method of mulch is, to help trap the soil moisture because we don't want to be losing that. It's going to help to keep the roots cool in the summertime when it's in the heat of the day. It's also going to help prevent the weeds. So, perennial weeds are one thing, but your annual weeds are definitely, going to be sort of combated by, a couple of good layers of mulch. It's also going to help with any type of wind erosion because your best soil fertility in most instances is in the top 3 to 4 inches of your soil. And if you leave that soil exposed and you have heavy rains or you have winds, then that top soil is eroding away. It's being carried away in some manner or another, which means you are also losing that beautiful fertility at the same time. And so that's a major issue too. So yes, mulch, 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 mulch.
Oh, I mean, I didn't realize, okay, I will sound dumb right here, but mulch, I knew you mulch to keep the moisture in. I did not realize that in the summer even that it would keep the roots cool. That's good.
Yes.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and it also depends sometimes on the type of mulch that you're using. If you're using a dark mulch, then that's going to attract the heat. So that's why we want to use those lighter colored mulches, like a very light colored wood mulch or the straw, or even sometimes, people have tossed like just animal bedding, like the cedar shavings, because that's all they had. It's light color, it's going to help to reflect that. And then if you're keeping it, mulched and you need to warm that soil up because it's early spring and you want to get those plants in early, then you just pull that mulch back and you allow those soil, those rays of the sun to penetrate the soil until it gets to the proper temperature that you like, and then cover it back up with the mulch, and now you're trapping the heat. So it does dual purpose depending on the season that you're in.
Hmm. Awesome.
See?
Oh my gosh. See, we all
Mulch.
learned something already. Um, but I just love it. And because it's like you created this podcast for me because this is exactly how I learn and how I need to take information in small bits because too much is too much. But how you just celebrated a big anniversary.
Oh, we hit 200 episodes. Yeah.
100 episodes. Okay. And I remember that one was like, ask me anything. I remember there were a lot of posts about that. Ask me anything. Do you have questions? Because I'll be discussing that in the episode. But so 200 episodes, congrats. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is our fourth season technically. So yeah, it's been fun. And I got to meet, fun people too, on the internet. I get to meet people like you and people, who either want to talk to me or, that I follow, and because we end up being in the same space, I get to chit chat or whatever. Or when I have guests on, I get to talk to some really cool people with regards to gardening and other types of things. So yeah, it's the true way that like social media should be. I mean, a podcast is kind of interesting because especially if you are a solo podcaster like I am, like 95% of my episodes are me by myself. It can be a little weird because you're just talking to yourself, basically. I mean, which I joke to my husband, that's why I started a podcast, because he doesn't listen to me. So I was tired of talking to myself. So maybe somebody else might listen. So but you're kind of like in this silo and you don't know if anybody's actually listening. Yeah, you get your download numbers from your service or whatever, but then when you start to get feedback from people and you have people messaging you, in messages like on Instagram or whatever, asking questions. And I love that. I don't ever want anybody to be afraid to ask me a question that they have about something that's going on in their garden. I get pictures from people all the time of like, oh my gosh, what is wrong with my plant? What is my leaf doing? Whatever. And I've actually had 3 people in the last week to 10 days who messaged me and said, oh my gosh, I'm sorry for bugging you. Or, oh my gosh, I have no idea if you're going to see this message with the, tons of messages that you must get, but here's my question. And first of all, I was super flattered that they thought that I was getting so many messages that I wouldn't see theirs. Like, I'm like, you are too cute. But I always will, do my best to try to answer something for somebody. And if I don't have the answer, I will point you towards the resources where you can find that answer for yourself, because I don't want anybody to feel like they're standing in their garden looking at some disaster that they think is happening and it not be as disastrous as they think it is, or just not have any way to get an answer. So yeah, I mean, the social aspect of things has kind of come out from the podcast and getting to talk to people, and you may not meet them in real life, but they're kind of your online friends, and it's cool. It brings the social back to social media, which has been nice.
Yeah. I love that part. I love the, when people say not even on social media, but my episode last week was on about menopause, and I had a couple of aunts that were like, "Really? What? Wait, I
What?
20 years
What?
ago, 20 years ago, maybe that's what that was." I was like, maybe. But
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I listened, and I that was so cool. And I know people listen because, like you said, the downloads and whatever, but it's always nice when the personal connection, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I'd rather see the people than the numbers.
For sure. And so I love your podcast. I think it's so, so helpful, so important to do, because growing food is very important for sustainability, of course, and for
Hmm.
health. You never know if the stores are going to be open. There could be a pandemic, and things would just, the shelves would be empty. But aside from that, you were just telling me also that you're doing something specifically for yourself, and I'm I'm just in awe of you, Karen. I don't know how you find enough time in the day. I mean, you work for yourself, so that's really cool. Do you literally like not sleep? Because you do a lot.
Oh no, I guard my sleep. I guard my sleep voraciously. So I spent about 15 years dealing with some chronic illnesses after I was medically retired from the Marine Corps. And that was why I was running my own business, because I physically couldn't go and work for somebody else. I would need to take breaks during the day and that sort of thing. And um, that transitioned from computer work into being outside and working, even though my health was continuing to decline. And in 2017, we found a fix, at least for one of the problems that I was having, which involved some surgery. And along the way, we figured out that one of the things that was wrong with me had actually caused me to develop osteopenia and early onset osteoporosis at the age of 44, whatever I was. Um, I had always been an athlete as a kid. I'd always played sports. I was always very active. I played soccer and softball and volleyball. And I mean, if it was a sport, I would play it whether I was good at it or not. And don't ask me to play basketball. I'm horrible at basketball. But um
But I played it.
and being in the being, but I played it. I played it. But, being in the Marine Corps, very physically active, loved obstacle courses, all of that stuff. And just my health hadn't allowed me to do anything active like that. And it was all I could do to get the farm stuff done, and even at that point, it was getting harder and harder. So when all of this happened and it was like, okay, I'm having this surgery and it should help to fix some things, I realized I needed to do something to help sort of like rebuild my health now that I had the ability, and also rebuild my bone density. We're talking about, menopause types things. And so I decided to take up running. Um, and it was horrible at first. Like, it was so bad. I'm like, why am I doing this? Why? I hate this. But I knew kind of that why am I doing this? Okay, fine, suck it up, keep going, because you're doing this for a reason. And did it off and on, for the first year and a half, but then it was 2019 and I started to sort of get more consistent with it, because I discovered like these online challenges, and you would like, okay, you run a 10K and you get this little medal, and then it was, oh, there's local races to me. Like, this is a thing. You can go and run a 5K or a 10K. And I remember doing that as a kid. My dad was a runner, and my brother and I had run a little bit with him. I ran a 10K when I was like 11 or 12. And but it just, I don't know, it was never on my radar after that. So started doing those types of things, and really started getting consistent with it. So eventually that, my competitive spirit sort of came back. And so running became a thing. Also weight training. I love weight training also. And that's more like competition with myself. Like, how much more can I lift, or how much more can I do? Um,
Safe.
and
How much more can you do safely?
safely. Exactly. How much? Yeah,
Don't want to
exactly.
break anything.
No, absolutely not. No, spent a long time being broken. I don't want to be broken again. And that's part of the reason why I guard my sleep. I spent those 15 years barely being able to sleep. I mean, if I could get 3 hours a night, I was lucky, and it was still probably broken. And once I was able to actually get a full night's sleep, I mean, it's no joke. I would say 5 nights out of 7 a week, I will get 9 hours of sleep, and I guard that. It's like, nope, I'm going to bed. Thank you very much. I will, get up and do my thing in the morning, whatever. So, I mean, obviously we work farmers markets. And so that means, on Saturday mornings, I might be getting up at 4:30 in the morning. So those are one of the nights, and then I have an early morning run group on Thursdays that, occasionally I will just go ahead and go to. So I might not get my full, 8 or 9 hours that night, but I sleep. And I think that is part of the reason why I'm able to take on what I take on. So since I have transitioned from just doing 5Ks and 10Ks, I now do ultra marathons, and just ran my first 50 miler in March. And so this 2 weekends ago, I did, I don't know, another marathon. I did an 8.5 hour event. I'm doing the Pikes Peak Marathon in September. I'm going to go for my first 100 miler probably in December. I can do those things in addition to the farm work, in addition to the podcast and the consulting and everything else, because I focus on that recovery. And I think people really underestimate the value of a good night's sleep. And there are processes in your body that actually cannot occur unless you are asleep, because they can't take the energy away from all of the other systems that are going on. So those certain repair processes can't happen unless you are asleep. And so if I can do that, I can keep my nutrition the way that it's supposed to be, and I can get the sleep that I need to. It allows me to be able to tackle all of the other things that I decide to take on, and do it without, feeling like I'm run down or dying or whatever. So yeah.
So whatever you can do everything, and then like 8 o'clock, you're like later, 8 p.m.
Yeah, 8:30. The dog knows. The dog is like, Mom, it's time for bed. Let's go. Let's go. And so we'll go in, and I'm not going to sleep, but at least I'm winding down for the night. By 10 o'clock, I'm usually out, and that way I can get my 8 or 9 hours and I'm up. We're horrible farmers. We don't get up at like the crack of dawn because we don't have to. We've arranged our schedule to where we just
Yep.
don't have to. Yeah, it's like, I mean, if it's a heavy harvest day early in the spring when the stuff, it's leafy greens and stuff, and you've got to do it when it's very cool out, then that's one thing. Or the middle of July when, by 9 o'clock it's 90 plus degrees out. Yes, you got to get the tomatoes in first thing in the morning before, that's a little bit different. But other than that, I'm not getting up at 4:30 in the morning to do anything. I'm also not milking cows either, so yeah, that's a whole other thing. So
But so you were saying, Karen, that you started running at like 44-ish?
yeah, I didn't start running. I turned 50 this past October. And so yeah, I didn't start running. Yeah, I didn't start running
You know,
until,
me in November.
seriously. So and I mean, and if you think about it, I ran my first ultra marathon last November. So literally within a month of turning, I ran the Marine Corps Marathon for my 50th birthday, and then ran another marathon the next week. And then 3 weeks later, ran my first ultra marathon where I did 36 miles. And I had just turned 50 when I did that. So
An ultra
yeah.
marathon is 30 miles, you said?
An ultra marathon is anything that is beyond a full marathon. So a full marathon is 26.2 miles. And so if you go beyond that, it's considered an ultra marathon. Now, most standard distances, say 50K is technically an official distance, which is like 31 miles. And then you can go beyond that. So I've done distances. My first time was 36 and some change. My second one was around the same. And then this past spring, I had a 12-hour event, and it basically, the goal is how fast or how far can you run in those 12 hours, and my goal was 50 miles, and I hit 50.2 with about 5 minutes to spare. So
Oh, nice. And you're
got it. So yeah,
working toward a 100 mile or 100K in just
100 mile.
food.
So it'll be a 24-hour event that I'll sign up for. It'll be it'll be a year later. It'll be the same event that I did my very first one. The very first one that I ran was a 9 hour. And that was when I hit my 36 miles or whatever it was. So this year they have introduced a 24 hour. And so that's the goal is I'm going to sign up for the 24 hour, and I'm going to see if I can train to where I could actually hit 100 miles within that 24 hour. It helps that it's in December, so it's nice and cool, but
Well, I was
you
gonna say,
know,
and
it's a
you're not gardening, so you can focus on that.
right, and that's it. I mean, can start, but the training starts now, and I've actually so the Pikes Peak Marathon is at the end of September, and so the goal right now I'm using a 100 mile training plan, and the Pikes Peak Marathon fits right in there because Pikes Peak is no standard road marathon. You're literally running from Manitou Springs up to Pikes Peak in the Rocky Mountains, and so the elevation you're starting at I think 11,000 feet or something like that. And you're going up to like 26,000 feet at the peak and coming back down a single track, 12% grade. So it's not your standard. I'll be out there for probably 9 hours running a marathon.
Have you done
So
it
this will be
like
good
that
training for
before?
that.
It's just the air
I
and
have not done that one. That one I'm running in honor of my dad. My dad passed this past New Year's, and it was something that he ran when we lived in Colorado. Of course, he was 28 at the time, and I'll be 50, so just getting ready to turn 51. So there'll be a big difference. But I have done um, technical trail races. My second ultra was a race called Cactus Roulette, and so you got to run on these very technical hiking trails, and there was 3 different ones, and you got to spin a roulette wheel to see which one you would run on. And you go out and run it, come back in, spin the wheel again. So, I mean, it was super fun. And it was a 12-hour race. We started it at noon and went until midnight. So you got to run in the dark too with a headline. I know ultra runners and trail runners are a different breed. I get it. People look at us like we're crazy,
did you
but
see
it's
that in my
fun.
eyes? I'm like, none of that
Yes.
sounds like
Saw
fun.
that in your eyes. Like, what is she
I
talking
don't
about? Yeah.
understand where that fun is. Where I missed that part.
Yeah. It's what we call type 2 fun. You see, it may not be fun while you're doing it, but then afterward you're like, oh, that was fun. I'll do that again.
Oh my gosh. But you've done elevation running before?
The only elevation I've actually run is I did a turkey trot when I was out there in Colorado just visiting, and that was a 5K. So, I mean, and it was on a road. It was nothing like this elevation. So, and since I'm obviously not training at elevation in West Central Missouri, my thing is going to be summer training, and doing it is like sort of heat training. So, because it gets hot and humid here, it will simulate some of those conditions and the science behind what happens to your body when you acclimatize to heat and you sort of build up that that heat endurance also mimics some of the changes that happen when you are trying to run at altitude and you're trying to get that sort of additional red blood cells going, et cetera, and the oxygen absorption. So if I can, instead of running in the early mornings, I'll be running like in the heat of the day throughout the summer, trying to build that up and build that endurance up before going out there. And my daughter's getting married the same weekend in Estes Park. So it'll be wedding on Friday in Estes Park, and then Sunday down in Colorado Springs, or in Manitou, running the race. So I'll be out there for a couple of days, at least get my altitude legs under me a little bit. So
Do you have are there family members also doing the race with you?
no, me, myself, and I. Me,
No.
myself, and I. None of the rest of my family is not that insane. They're yeah, no. So I will have support when I come back down the mountain. They'll see me at
I'll
the
sit
bottom. That'll
here,
be it.
yeah.
Yeah, that'll be it.
We just showed up here to say hi.
Yeah, they can see me off as the race starts, and then they can go, shop and have lunch and do whatever, and
Go
8
sleep.
or 9 hours, come back and go take a nap, whatever. Yeah, come back and see me as I wreck myself coming down the hill.
Oh gosh. I think that's so amazing. And I love that it's not just like, I mean, some people run for like weight loss or whatever,
Mhm.
but you're doing it for endurance and your bone density and stuff like that. So that's really important. I
It is, and I mean, I think also it's the mental thing too. I mean, we talk about sustainability in terms of you know the rest of our lives and the environment and, our work and all those things. But when you talk about sustainability in terms of our physical bodies, but also our mental well-being, there is something to be said physically for having to train for something like that and getting your body to push its limits. But the human body is capable of a lot more than we give it credit for. It's our minds that have the problem. It's um that primitive brain that wants us to be in the most comfortable position possible in order to preserve ourselves, and that's from, millennia of, having to defend ourselves against, apex predators and survival and everything else. And so we still have that sort of, connection in our brain that says, no, no, we shouldn't be doing this right now. This is dangerous. We should slow down. We should stop. And so physically we may be able to go, but our brain is telling us we can't. And that mental challenge and that mental battle, if you can get through that and you can push through that and say, no, I can do this, just translates over into every other stressful situation in your entire life. If you can manage to push yourself to the limits and get yourself through the pain and the discomfort of, okay, my hip is hurting or my knees are hurting or my feet are blistered or whatever, and get through and get to that finish line, then everything else that goes on in your life is easy. You don't panic over things, or you take things a little bit differently when there's something difficult that comes on. So if I lose a crop, or if there's an insect pest that's coming in, or if I've got, some sort of disease in my tomatoes, it's like, okay, we're going to problem solve, because that's what you have to do. In an ultra marathon, you're problem solving on the fly. So it just translates over into the rest of my life.
Oof. Wow. That I'm just I'm in awe, because my brain definitely does that. You don't do anything hard, for sure. But
Yeah.
I just, and I would think also there's a lot of head clearing that happens.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
50.
you get some really good ideas while you're out there running for really long times. And the funny thing that happens, my long run on Sunday was like 14 miles. And I threw my headphones in and was listening to podcasts. But after a while, it doesn't matter what you're listening to. It could be podcast, it could be a playlist, it could be an audiobook. At some point, your brain starts to wander away from whatever's going on in your ear holes. It's just not paying attention. It's doing its own thing. And that's when it's like, I get these ideas for, oh, I have, this new shirt idea I want to do for my merch shop, or I want to, or I could do this online course. That would be the next thing that I should teach people, or whatever. And it's unfortunate that I can't run with a notebook and take all these ideas down, because by the time I get done with the run, I don't remember what it was. It might come to me later on in the day if I'm lucky, but yeah, a lot of people get their best ideas in the shower. I get some really good ideas while I'm out on a long run.
Yeah. I mean, I was just thinking, like, 100 miles, that's going to be a lot of stuff that you're going to want to put down on paper or something.
Yeah. Need to have somebody running alongside me. Take notes. I'll just swap out pacers. They have to take notes while they run with me.
Or, I mean, could you do like this? I don't use the Alexa things, but if you have a phone on you, could you be like, "Hey Alexa."
Oh yeah, I could tell Google to take a
Oh,
note or whatever,
yeah,
and then go back and find it later. Yeah, actually, that's a very good point. Yeah, could do that.
because I
See,
would be so
problem
mad
solving
if
right
I
here.
had, yeah, I would be so mad if I had all these thoughts and I'd be like, I know I had a thought. It was really good.
I've had like complete podcast episodes in my brain, like have said the whole thing, and then I'll go to do the actual episode and go, what was it that I was talking about? Oh, I said something really good, but now I don't remember what, what it was. So yeah,
For sure.
maybe I
Oh
should just
my
start
God.
recording myself while I run.
Oh gosh, Karen, this is amazing. I learned so much from you. I mean, on the weekly, and also, and so much more today, because this is so fun for me. What does the word sustainability mean to you?
It's funny because as I was going through and getting my degree in horticulture, I was actually doing a dual major in sustainability.
What's
And I got so anxious to just graduate, because I was like, I'm over this right now, that I dropped the dual major, because they're like, well, you can't actually graduate until you complete both. And I went, oh no, we're just going to drop that one. If I get back to it later, that's fine. I'm like, no, no, we're not doing this. But, that was sort of from my perspective, I had always and only thought about sustainability from an agricultural standpoint. I'd only ever thought about it from the aspect of not using things that were gonna be detrimental to the soil later on down the road. And once I started taking a few of those classes and started talking to professors, it was like, "Oh, this is way bigger than what I thought it was. And this encompasses so much more than just agriculture, and there's a lot of it that has to do with people and society and just every facet of our lives." And so to me, anything can fall under the umbrella of sustainability. Our health, our physical health, our mental health, our well-being, all the way to the environment and to politics and to all those things. So I think sustainability really does mean whatever action we are taking today for the good of the people here right now should not in any way be detrimental to the people who come behind us, or the plants or the animals or the societies that come after we are here. We should be taking care of ourselves. We should be taking care of each other, and we should be taking care of the planet, but we should be doing it in a way that is not going to be detrimental for those that come next. That to me is just the overarching idea behind sustainability. And it's unfortunate that that term has been thrown around so much as a sort of keyword or talking point that nobody actually thinks about what it means anymore. And it's just another catchphrase, another thing, sustainable this, sustainable that. But when you really think about it and you think about it in those terms, it actually can influence every decision that you make in your life, regardless of what area that's in.
Mm, so good. Wow. And then, so how I have no doubt people are going to be like, wow, get me on this podcast. So tell us how we can find Karin Velez and get more of this.
Yes. Yeah. So the Just Grow Something podcast, you can find it at justgrowsomethingpodcast.com. And from there, you can subscribe in whatever your favorite, podcast player is. All the links are right there on the homepage. And that's also where you can find the blog posts and any online courses that I'm launching, all of that stuff. And you can also get on my newsletter, which I send out. Usually it's twice a week. It has been just here recently, only on Tuesdays, just letting everybody know what this week's episode is and what the key points are and giving you those references and resources. But then when I'm in not full farming mode, I also send out a Friday newsletter that points to, one of the blog posts or just something else that I'm talking about that might be a little bit off topic. So
You live off. I live off topic. That's for sure.
always.
And so on the socials, I know you're on Instagram.
Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, all under Just Grow Something or Just Grow Something podcast, depending on where you can find. And then if anybody's really interested in seeing the running thing, they can actually follow my Instagram for that, which is, I changed it recently, so I have to think about it, Keeping Fit at 50. Just search my name, you'll find me. Because I might change that again here soon too. Who knows?
Who knows?
Who
But
knows?
you know that you're going to be busy, that's for sure.
Always.
Anyway, thank you so much for sharing all of this stuff. I can't even, I don't, I'm so impressed that you sleep like a lot. And it makes sense to me that because you sleep a lot, you can do all these things. But it just doesn't seem like there's enough time in the day for the farming and the running and all and the blog posts and TikTok and like, oh, I got to get some of that sleep, man. But
Yes.
good for you. Good for you. And you have energy. I'm like, I just sat on my butt all day working and I'm like, I got nothing.
Well, that's partly why you've got nothing. I move. I move all day. In my job, I move, in my hobbies, I move, so, and that keeps you moving. A body in motion stays in motion. So, if I sit down at my Mondays are my admin days, I sit at the computer and I'm doing bookkeeping and accounting and taxes and marketing and all that kinds of stuff. But I have to get up And so not only do I have my watch set for every 3 hours to get something to eat. And so I make sure that I get up and I move and I get something to eat and I walk around a little bit. I might grab my lunch and go walk out into the gardens and I'm eating while I'm walking, but at least I'm moving around. So the more we move, the more energy we get.
Mm, wow,
Hmm.
awesome.
Yep.
And folks, all this information is going to be in the show notes, and definitely check out the podcast and the newsletter and all the stuff, because Karen has so much to share. Period.
Yep.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm so thrilled that we finally got to like face to face meet.
So am I. Thank you for having me.
Anytime. My goodness. And so, oh.